Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. So we are launching on an exploration of Dao De Jing. I'm still trying to pronounce it. And it's a very deep book. It's a very interesting book. It's just 81 little poems. Joe, can you help me with letting people in? Thanks. It's just 81 poems, and I look at it as poems. This is going to be actually very exciting and very difficult. In some ways, very difficult, and in some ways, really, really exciting. So it's both. So I want to say something. So firstly, there is a distance between the Chinese way of thinking and the Western way of thinking. And that distance is very, very large. And it takes time to get used to it. So please be patient with yourself. Please be gentle as you try to take in. There is a tendency that we have whenever we look at something, some set of ideas which are very different from ours, to formulate all of them in our own terms. If you do that, you miss a lot. So you kind of have to listen to it very closely and try. Now, each person will have their own way of approaching it. So there are no teachers here. We are all students. We are all studying nature. I mean, that's what Daoism is about. It's about this profound reverence for nature and what the world is, what nature is, what reality is. And us as human beings, we're just trying to understand what it is and follow its path. That's all we're trying to do. So there are no teachers, there are no students. Everybody's a teacher, everybody's a student in another sense. We're going to hear from many people. It's going to be highly interactive. If you're offering something, assume that you're a student. If you are accepting something, know that you yourself, your teacher is nature. Anybody else is just another student of nature. So take it from that perspective, both whether you're trying to tell somebody something or whether you're trying to learn, have that kind of attitude. I think that does everybody well. All of us will gain a lot from that. Please be patient, please be gentle as we try to learn. I don't know this field, okay? I just don't know this. This is very, very new to me. And I'm going to struggle very hard to understand it. And I'm going to get most things wrong. So don't pay attention to what I'm saying. I will try to say things. That's my way of, I would rather speak out what I understand so that I myself and others and reality can correct me. So take everything that I am saying with gobbles of salt. And so do for everybody else, because what that does is that it's between us and nature. And that's, if you establish just that relationship, you learn, and you learn slowly and patiently. So that's what we're trying to do. We're doing a whole bunch of meetups. It's going to be, I'm planning at least a dozen meetups. So if you think it's worthwhile, just be at it, come at it from different angles. We will look at different aspects of, multiple translations, hearing different interpretations. I want it to be highly interactive. So I want features like, these are little poems, and there are some poems that I like, and I'm sure there are different poems that you like. So you always have the option of reciting any of the poems, any of the 81 poems that you want, and talk about what you got from it. So it's going to be like a multi-faceted way of exploring this philosophy. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So now, anybody who has read this book at least a year ago or something like that, we'll start with people who have read a little bit about it. If you could just talk about your experience of reading it, what you got from it, at a very high level of what does this book have to offer? What does this way of thinking have to offer to us today? How does it add to the conversation? And feel free, please, just go ahead and share your thoughts. So that way, all of us will learn from it. The same rules apply. If you want to speak anytime, just go ahead and type exclamation mark. Keep on topic. We are exploring Dao De Jing. Tao Teh Ching, yeah, like that. And I have to get the musical notes right, and I have to get, I'm working on it. It's almost like I'm speaking and then suddenly I have to go into singing. So anybody who is familiar with it, I would first invite you guys to talk about, what this work is, what it means to you, what does it have to offer to people. Keep things short. You'll have multiple choices of adding whatever. So I'm just going to throw it open and say what people who are a little bit familiar with it, at least a year ago, if you have read it, just go ahead and type exclamation mark and just make some general comments about what you got from the book. So who would like to get started? Let's see. I'm going to give it about 30 seconds. Folks, go ahead. Don't be shy. The nature doesn't care if you make a fool of yourself. So, all right, let's see. Kevin, can I ask you some questions to start off?
Absolutely, Frank.
Okay. So, Kevin, see, you're from a Chinese culture, and you probably have lived with this for a long time. What do you get from Daoism?
It's big. I would say, let's see, from words, let's see, from where we know. We talk about the known, unknown. The word, let's see, Dao is used like a prefix or suffix lots. And no, let's see, for example, is I know. That's mean I know. I know the Dao. The Dao, 知道. That's mean the Dao. That's part of a word. You see how frequent, like how deep, people use this. It's building in the culture, like
Okay,
in Chinese.
yeah. Kevin, sorry to interrupt you, but
okay.
let's first see if people can pronounce the name of the book. Can you tell us how to pronounce the name? And anybody who wants to try can try it. Okay, go ahead, Kevin.
Let's try it together. They basically pinyin, right? They call it Dao Dao the first. Dao Dao.
Dao Dao.
Dao Dao. Yeah, Dao. Yeah, Dao is very good. Extra everybody.
Dao is going down, right?
Dao. I would say first. In the Chinese first, it's Dao De Jing.
Dao De Jing. Is that correct?
Jing is a force. Yeah.
Jing is like this, right? Jing.
Jing like peer. I'm going to show my camera, I guess.
Okay.
Let's see. Maybe need some gesture.
Okay. Does anybody else know how to pronounce Dao De Jing? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's me. You never see me,
wonderful.
right?
Yeah,
my head almost like you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Yeah. Okay.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's another maybe next session we're going to use. Let's see how to. I'm going to give you pinyin like Dao. Dao mean is like I know. That's it. The first that I know. There's a part if you translate to Chinese, it's 知道. That's mean I know the Dao. That's part of culture. De is like virtue. It used to be this back to 2,000 years ago. Law is minimum. Like minimum, you obey the law. For especially for officer, you got a high requirement. Like you have the good de, then that's big deal. By the way, I'm going to talk about a little bit Lao Tzu. That he is maybe not. His original maybe is editor. He's head of the National Library. So he read lots of books, maybe like yourself, more than you do. It's basic. At that time, book, don't forget, it's hard. The paper is so expensive. They don't have digital. They use bamboo or use some, the bone skeleton. It's hard. They basically collect everything, already. then put this 81 chapter.
Mhm.
First to 37, it's about the Dao. It's Dao self is basically like first, if you can describe Dao, that's not Dao. That's
Mhm.
mean before we know the how its rules, laws, nature law, how they create are universal.
Mhm.
You think about the Big Bang,
Mhm.
who create the Big Bang behind
Mhm.
those power. That's called Dao. If you see
Mhm.
that's Dao, okay, how let's see use R, let's see Newton law or something.
Mhm.
It's not Dao. It's
Mhm.
before that.
Mhm.
That's the second one is the last 48 chapter for
Mhm.
most chapters talk about how social the whole ourself to
Mhm.
nature.
Mhm.
I'm going
Wonderful.
to, yeah.
You know what? Last time you recited out from the number 25. Can we do that? Because that's my favorite. That's the for me. That's the way of that's my like summary of the whole thing. That's where I start. So let me just read it out. This is I'm using the Ursula Le Guin translation. I have renamed all the she has titles which I don't like. So for my title for it is Four Greatnesses, and this is how she puts it. This is number 25. There is something that contains everything. Before heaven and earth it is. Oh, it is still, unbodied, all on its own, unchanging, all pervading, ever moving. So it can act as the mother of all things. Not knowing its real name, we only call it the way. If it must be named, let its name be great. Greatness means going on. Going on means going far. Going far means means turning back. So they say, the way is great, heaven is great, earth is great, and humankind is great. Four greatnesses in the world, and humanity is one of them. People follow earth, earth follows heaven, heaven follows the way follows what is. For me, this is the first time I kind of got the whole picture. So I'm going to open it up for comments. Mary, you had a comment. Go ahead. Mary, you can just unmute yourself.
Hi. My question is this. I think the way the Dao De Jing is written is so beautiful. And there's something that it describes. I'm sorry, my background just popped up. There's something that it describes that is immutable. And I feel grounded by it. And I wonder how to put that into context with the sense of, and I know this is Taoism. How do you put that into context with, Buddhism, which suggests that nothing is permanent?
Sure. Let's do one thing. We'll take questions like this a little bit later because we're trying to first understand what this approach is, and we can connect it to other philosophies like Buddhism, maybe Confucianism, maybe in the like fourth or fifth meetup or something like that. Currently, I just want to make sure, I want to give floor to people who are familiar with the work to talk about their take on the work, because we need to establish that first. I'm a baby here, I don't know much. And there are many people here, friends of mine, who do not know much either. So I want people to talk about their own understanding, what they have learned from this book as a base, a common base. And once we have a common vocabulary, we can go and handle more complex questions. So I'm going to have Madeline followed by Steve. Madeline.
Yes, thanks. Thank you, Kevin. I just was wondering if Kevin could explain the meaning of the last word, Ching.
Sure. Kevin, go ahead.
Jing, let's see. Bible, single word, let's see, Bible, or 2 words, great book. Let's see, from old days. Little bit different Bible. It's not even the Daoism, the Howard, right? If yeah, you are right. That's first book, right? I would say Bible for Daoism.
Yeah, I would call it the best I would translate it is scripture. So all, for example, the 4 books and 5 classics, you know, all the, I think all the classics are called Ching. So I Ching, all of that. So Ching is basically the closest translation I have for this is scriptures. You know, these are classics, fundamental books that form the basis of the Chinese culture.
Yeah, for example, I'll give you one example. Let's say 圣经. Let's see the Bible, our Christian Bible, we call it the Holy Bible. Let's be kind of Dao Bible. That's Jing. Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah, 2 things. I just want to share my personal experience reading the Tao Te Ching, and I have a question with Kevin. I'll start with the question for Kevin first. Is the I Ching and the Tao Te Ching the same?
Kevin,
the I Ching.
Kevin, you want to answer it? They're completely different books. They're
I Jing, right? I Jing,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
Oh, that's Jane said that's another huge. That's basically you. Even we use they got it 86. That's if we use Vana. We're going to use it later. Vana like is going to beautiful. It makes sense for everyone.
Wonderful.
Yeah,
next
it's different.
up.
Sure.
Yeah, it's different. It's more. This one is kind of more deeply philosophical of kind of setting the base of thinking. I Ching is more about kind of tools for analyzing change, I would say, if I want to put it at that level.
So the challenge for me reading the Tao Te Ching, which I read back in 2005, is that it's a book to be read without you in it. And I noticed that when I was reading, trying to figure out what it meant, it didn't work. Tao Te Ching meant for me reading it as an observer, without Stephen thinking, just by Stephen participating, and that's as far as I could go. So that's the reason why I wanted to sign in, to hear about the Tao Te Ching without Stephen.
Wonderful.
Reading to Stephen, interpreting it to Stephen. So
yes, I mean, yeah, that is definitely the perspective of Dao De Jing. I mean, it's about nature, and it is all about kind of acceptance of nature and letting go of your ego that stops you from taking in nature. Next up is George.
Thanks. I reread this from the back forwards. I wanted to find out who done it, and I was surprised to find in chapter 31, the last line. They seem to always end with a punchline, and the last line of chapter 31 in my translation is "Victory in war should be treated as a funeral." Very practical for these days, don't you think? Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, but it is unusually small. I mean, if you look at the entire, all the 81, the amount of politics in it is relatively small as compared to other, like, for example, if you compare to Confucius, this is kind of more of core philosophy. But he does talk about this in several of the stanzas. Let's see, who else? Madeline, you had something.
Yes, I would not at all compare the I Ching to the Bible, except possibly for those who know the Bible, I might compare it to the Psalms. It's what would be called an immanent sense of the divine, which means pervasive in everything. Whereas the Bible is story-based And it's a transcendent sense of the divine, which is a God that stands outside of our lives, outside of human lives.
Got it.
So both of them are compilations, probably written by various authors that somehow manage to speak in a single voice, but they come from very different viewpoints. And I'd say philosophically that the Tao, as it says in the Tao, comes before all gods.
Mhm. Okay. Anybody else wants to share what they have learned from Dao De Jing? Kevin, go ahead.
I'm going to reply towards previous guide before Madeline is. Yeah, it's profound. It's war is basically it's a disaster. He mentioned lots about that. It is. Who is winner? Let's think about the war from World War II to Iraq War. Who is winner? Think about now. Now go to Madeline mention that about story. After Laozi is Zhuangzi. I'm going to post this book. It's a lot of beautiful story. I'm going to share one. Let's see. The one guy reply, "You are not a face. How do you know the faces are happy?" Let's see. The in the one container is one face, right? They question Zhuangzi ask, "You think the face is happy?" He replied, "How do you know that faces are happy?" Zhuangzi said, "You are not I. How do we know? I don't know the face is happy." You see another circle. It's logical, dialectic thinking. I'm not. You are not face. I'm not face. How do you know I'm not? I don't know the face is happy. That's. Thank you.
Wonderful. Folks, go ahead and share whatever you're learning, even if you are just beginning to read. I would like to hear what people's impressions are. You know, this is going to be interactive. I'm trying to design this series with people who are just trying to learn the Tao in mind. So the more you talk, the more I'll be able to put things together. We've got some amazing things planned. The finale is going to be Yasuhiko Kimura, who has translated this book. He's going to come and he's going to talk about how to apply it in 21st century, the principles. But please go ahead and share your thoughts so we can get a very deep conversation going. Don't ask questions here. Just talk about, you know, we're not going to do Q&A at this point. Just let's try to put as many things on the table as possible. And then we will talk about questions. So it's going to be Lisa, Marilyn, and Judith. Lisa.
Hi, I'm not sure how helpful this is going to be. I'm not sure if it's right to inject words like ego and self and any of that would further our understanding. But what I remember about the book is that there was a great deal of attention paid to virtuous behavior, actually, and the way people behaved. And the hypocrisy in doing good, or in doing good as in not coming from the right place in oneself, so that it wasn't really good at all. And that's the little I remember at the moment.
Wonderful. That's fantastic. Thank
Okay.
you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Lisa. Next up is Marilyn, Judith, Maritza, and Joe. Marilyn.
Hello. Yeah, one thing that I've learned about the Tao so far, and I'm pretty new to this, is the translations in English are wildly different. So I flipped to chapter 37 this morning, and the first line of one translation is waymaking Tao is really nameless, Wu Ming. And then I compared it with another translation. The same line was translated, Tao does not intervene. And then in brackets, with the natural course of things. So nameless and intervene, like it really makes me want to know the original language. And I get a sense from both of these translations, like I kind of like grok it, like I can kind of get a sense of what like what the meaning is, but only through like really, you know, comparing them and kind of getting a general idea from it, but also like knowing from this exercise that these translations, like something's always getting lost or something's getting interjected.
That's a fantastic observation. We'll talk about translations in detail. How do you, like, for example, I'm facing the same issue. So I have about 6 different translations. So what I, you know, because I have tried to do this for many languages. Like I've tried to understand Greek, for example, you know, like Aristotle or Plato, tried to understand like Sanskrit. And these are all very different languages. And it's not just different languages, these are different ways of thinking. So it's the distance between where you are and where Lao Tzu is so large that it is, you know, there is language, there is thought patterns which are different. Now the question is, how do you traverse these? You know, how do you traverse this? So the solution that I have come up with is that I look through and try to find a translation that speaks to me. And I'm not trying to do, it's not a good idea to do literal, like line by line translation. It's good to kind of take in the whole and see the entire impact, because he's just seeing things which are actually very simple. It's just one philosophy that he's trying to describe. So I would recommend look through translations, find something that speaks to you so you can read it as poems and respond to it, and then work with multiple translations. Because what I found is that I was working with 6 translations. I choose something that you really like. So for me, it is 25. So it's like, that's my favorite poem. So I'm looking at all translations of it. And actually, it is much better to think of these translations as commentaries, because so much is being injected, so much is being interpreted in so many different ways that you can take all of them. Some of them actually don't make sense, so then you throw away those translations if they fail repeatedly on giving you anything useless. But you will find that multiple ones, you'll probably find like 4 or 5 which actually are saying something. And then you kind of relate all those concepts together in order to figure out what is going on. So that's what I'm using. But you know, I look forward to discussing this issue in great amount of detail. The good thing is that multiple translations are available for free. There are some very old translations, very new translations, each with their own flair. And we'll share translations in the group and things like that to build that up. But this is a very important topic, and I look forward to discussing this in great amount of detail. Thank you very much. Next up is Judith.
It's new to me. I listened. I would like to get a copy of a translation. I like the ideas. I listened to someone reading it on YouTube, and you know, at the end, he said that you know, that how you emphasize the words even can make a difference. So it's important that you read it yourself. But Shrikant, you asked for initial thoughts and feelings. So these are just my initial feelings as someone new. My initial feeling is that what Stephen said was he was curious here, you know, to see what he would get out of it without having the Stephen injected in it. Well, that's what I actually felt was like, this is very personal. Like this philosophy, each person reading it, it's so soft and fluid in the way you can interpret it that you can personalize it. And I think the idea of a prescription is something that a lot of us in the West sometimes look for, like, how am I supposed to live my life? Where's the next self-help book? But that's my understanding at this point, is that that's kind of against what the Tao Te Ching is trying to do. It's not it's not a place where you find a prescription. It's a place where you find your own self and your meaning. And also just having heard that read through, I paused many times and re-listened. So I listened very carefully. I took a couple hours to do it, but I can't remember the specific verses anymore per se. But I do feel like there's so much in there that if you were to read it now and then a year from now and then 10 years from now, there would be different parts of it that would come forward and be extremely meaningful. And then other parts that you might think about in a different way. And I think that's one of the beauty of this. What is very appealing to me about it is that it has that aspect that it avoids those compartments we like to put in. And that's what it's constantly doing, making you look one way and then the other way, softening you, you know, like bending you back and forth a little bit so that you just don't, you know, see things so rigidly. That's how I feel about it.
No, that was great observations, Judith. I mean, I think there is a difference in the Western way of looking at things and this way of looking at things. And I think the softness versus hardness goes to the heart of it. Kind of listening, a lot of kind of listening in and taking in, as opposed to just being active and trying to do something right now. That distinction, you know, there is a lot of listening that is going on. There is a tremendous respect for reality and saying, let me try to hear what is being said here by nature, by reality to me. There is a kind of humility that is there that permeates it, which is very different. So very well put. So so folks, just go ahead and get whatever, let's put on the table whatever impressions that we have. We are going to go through this. We are going to look through it multiple times. As Judith is saying, that it is going to look different 10 years from now. I expect that in each of the meetup, it is going to look different. As you hear many people speak, as you read yourself, listen to it yourself, you know, there are many layers of it. And I'm trying to compress time by this intense focus on it, by all, you know, many of us individually, as well as in interaction, instead of getting what we got over 10 years, I'm trying to grok this sooner. All right, so so the next up is going to be Maritza, Joe, David, Donna, Ash, Mary, and George. Folks, take your time to make your point. There is no hurry. Go ahead, Maritza.
So I had read this a long time ago, and I just went in when you talked about the Tao of May. I just went back and reread it. And what strikes me here is I see two sides of things said. And it's like it's the same thing, but it's said in a different way. And that's intriguing. 78 for me is the one that speaks strongest. It's the one talking about water. And it's really beautiful to me that we're reminded that, you know, nothing's, you know, that water is super malleable while at the same time.
Maritza, may I request you to read it out?
Oh, sure. I have like 4 different translations up here. There is nothing in the world more soft and weak than water. And yet for attacking things that are firm and strong, there's nothing that can take precedence of it. For there's nothing so effectual for which it can be changed. Everyone in the world knows that the soft overcomes the hard, and the weak the strong, but no one is able to carry it out in practice. Therefore, a sage has said, he who accepts his state's reproach is hailed, therefore, its altars lowered. To him who bears men's direful woes, they all name the king of accord. Words that are strictly true seem to be paradoxical. just, I really, the idea of being reminded of that disparity, that the two things live in one. And I see that throughout the entire book, but no more so as in this chapter. And it reminds me of the need we have in life for balance, and how so many of the issues we see in our personal environment and in our external environments and in the world in general, they all stem from a lack of considering this required balance. And so I'm interested in seeing more on how other people react to that concept.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Marisa. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by David. Joe.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I've been reading a little bit about it itself. I've only read some of them, some of the poems. 17 kind of spoke to me, which is acting simply.
Would you like to read it out?
Sure. Yeah, I'll read it. True leaders are hardly known to their followers. Next after them are the leaders the people know and admire. After them, those they fear. After them, those they despise. To give no trust is to get no trust. When the work's done right, with no fuss or boasting, ordinary people say, "Oh, we did it." And I think that that's just, to me, you know, the idea of leadership is just not necessarily having to have a heavy hand. And that's what this book speaks to on a number of levels, is the idea of being fluid. And there's the yin and the yang concept that we, you know, talk about, how essentially there's that we've kind of grown to not admire the feminine as much as we should in the Western culture. And I think that in this case is that that this book in general helps us appreciate what the feminine brings to culture versus the masculine that ends up being much more focused on efficiency and focused on speed and delivery and things along those lines. So I think that that's really the most interesting part of this book, is it can provide us a way of slowing down, and in addition to just giving us a new perspective on our lives as well. So that's why I'm really excited about this book. And we were talking about it yesterday with Michael. You know, that there's some elements to that. It's just, we were talking about the idea of just perspective, you know, and how Josh's perspectives have changed. I almost can see it in this type of book. I had a couple other comments, but I kind of forget what they were.
Sure, you'll have a chance to come back and talk some more. But I think the idea of leadership here and throughout this work is very, very fascinating, because it is kind of bottom-up relationship. He's saying leader is a person who can follow the people, who can understand the people. And because he understands and cares about the people, he can do things without doing much. So it is not a top-down control that he's talking about. It is kind of saying, understand what is going on in nature or with people. And if you work with that, then you are actually leading without leading. So it's really profound. Go ahead.
Can I just say really quickly, is something that you said yesterday that actually really reminded me of what this is about as well. Is that it's the idea of having a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. And I think that this speaks really to the idea of having being open. As much as I've read, again, I have to finish it. I literally just started reading it today. So anyway.
And the point that you're making, you and Marisa also made this point about yin, right? I mean,
yes,
water, and it is pointing to the power of that, because in that sense, it's like it is part of chaos. You know, it's like the Western culture is focused on the yang. something which is explicit, something which is driving. Whereas what he's pointing to is that the gathering of potential is taking place in the yin. And if you use that, then actually very little of action is needed, because all the action that you're taking will have that entire force of water behind you. So it's a beautiful dance that he talks about throughout. Next up is going to be David, followed by Donna. David.
What I take from the, well, from all the different works surrounding the Tao, you know, there's a lot of smaller detailed messages about leadership or whatever. I prefer to focus on the big message that Lao Tzu through Chuang Tzu is trying to talk about, which is what is behind the 10,000 things from that video that you recommended we look at. You know, behind the 10,000 things, what's going on? You know, I think that's what drove Lao Tzu and Chuang Tzu and a lot of people is what, you know, behind the, it's like the Wizard of Oz, behind the curtain, what is really governing the universe, or what drives everything, including you and I and all of us. And I think when Lao Tzu talks about the way of the Tao, he's talking about that fundamental, below everything, below molecules, below atoms, below us first, but it's sort of like our consciousness, subconscious, you know, below the atoms that we're made of. What's the eternal drive of all that exists? To me, that's what I get out of it, more than the detailed, the details that he's talking about. I look at the big picture. I think that's really, for me, the most interesting thing is, as you know, I've mentioned previously, I'm kind of like interested in physics. So to me, Tao and physics are very, very similar in that looking at what's the driving thing of the eternal, what's the eternal driving, you know, the void and the Tao. To me, that's the interesting thing anyways, the big message. Yeah. What is the eternal driving?
No, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right. I think, you know, even right from the first poem itself, it's basically telling you that there is a mystery, which is fundamental. And that's what we are going to be talking about. And what is it? It's basically way of nature is what you're trying to say. Okay, what, you know, it's not nature as kind of concretes, but the way of nature. How does nature work? And it is enormously complex things to understand, because it's kind of trying to name things, which is a sense of movement of everything. That's what you're trying to get at. And that sense of mystery, right? That sense of awe that is there. It's a religious feeling, almost a religious feeling. At the same time, go ahead.
Oh, you mentioned the word movement. Mm-hmm. And what creates movement is the Tao.
Yes.
What is that? What creates at the fundamental level? What creates movement? Heraclitus, you know, ancient Greek philosopher, 500 BC. Yeah. Mm-hmm. He said movement is the fundamental, and I'd say he's close. Maybe the Tao. What is it that creates movement? That's the fundamental.
Right, but I mean, the way you put it before, I mean, that was really the heart of it. That is what it is talking about. It is a metaphysical work, primarily a metaphysical work, and that has implications in psychology, in dealings with other people, in leadership, but all of those are secondary. It's primarily a metaphysical work, primarily epistemological work, but mostly a metaphysical work. Thank you. Next up is Donna, followed by Ash. Donna.
I'm very excited and moved by this. I haven't read anything yet. I've only watched the video that you had us watch. And I was so deeply moved. For me, it's about being moved deeply internally. And I think when I approach reading it, that will be the way that I absorb it. The things that stood out for me in watching the video, I wrote down: at the center of being, you have the answer. You know who you are, and you know what you want. It just, I can feel that at the center. It just feels so amazing and freeing. I've also read The Course in Miracles, and this reminds me of The Course in Miracles. But for some reason, this, I don't know, its simplicity is more powerful than The Course in Miracles.
Wonderful.
It's just, there's just so much beauty there. It's breathtaking. It's just breathtaking. Empty yourself of everything. Let the mind become still. It's just, I mean, those words are just, you can't get any more powerful than those words. And then this, oh, I'm just so moved by it. Darkness within darkness, the gate to all mystery. It's just incredible for me. Again, I'm coming from maybe from the knowledge of the Course in Miracles and illusion of separateness and the ego and the reality of the oneness of all of us. I'm really looking forward to reading it and being part of this group. It's just I can't express words for it. It's just too incredible, amazing.
Wonderful. Thank you, Donna. Really appreciate it. That was just beautiful, and that's exactly the kind of impact it has. I mean, for me, it reminds me of the first work like that I've seen is Gitanjali by Rabindranath Tagore. That was the first non-Western book to win the Nobel Prize. And what Gitanjali is basically, it means an offering of poems, and it's offering of poems to God. So this is what it is. This is a poems about the Tao. It is poems about the nature of existence. It is, and they are all poems, and that feel of awe permeates each of the poems. The expressions are myriad, but there is that theme of that awe and love of Tao that speaks in all the poems. So I think it is really, I'm reading it as poems. And it has exactly the kind of, Donna, you put it really beautifully, much better than I could. That is the exact sense that such work can have on you. So thank you, Donna. Next up is going to be Ash, followed by Mary. Ash.
Yeah, hi. So I mentioned at the beginning, this was my first time reading or listening to it. I just finished it before this meetup started, and so I'm still kind of processing it. But my initial reaction was similar to David's, that it struck me kind of at the metaphysical level. And I know you kind of discouraged us from translating it into Western terms too much.
Please go ahead.
But yeah, it really struck me as kind of a shock. It's a deeply relativistic work. Everything is defined in terms of, being relative to its opposite. And that feels shockingly modern from a Western perspective, and I can understand why a lot of modern physicists like Schrodinger were deeply influenced by this work. But as far as, the specific metaphysics that he is describing, it kind of reminded me of something like a cross between Aristotle's prime mover. David also mentioned, that movement is caused by the unmoved, which is like that, but also almost like a Spinozan pantheism. But yeah, sorry, I lost my train of thought where I was going with that, but it just, I guess to me, the deepest impression was just that idea that there are these basic fundamental principles about how reality operates, and that in order to be at peace and achieve serenity, that we should bring ourselves into alignment with those fundamental principles of reality, whether it's at the personal level or the interpersonal or the political. And so that was kind of the core of the book's message for me on first reading.
Wonderful. And I look forward to having your second opinion and third opinion and the fourth opinion as we go through it, because it is a very deep work. And as we go on, I think all of us are going to iterate over it. We'll listen to other people, maybe read different translations. I think that will also do things. And then I think our view of it will keep morphing as we go along. So really looking forward to that. Ash, thank you. Next up is going to be Mary, followed by George. Mary.
Hi, I'm back again. Thank you. I just want to say every thing I read and hear from other people saying things has humbled me more and more and more. This is absolute beauty. This work is absolute beauty. It is poetry and revealing and profound, and it is precise and vague, and it is, as the last man said, is relative to its opposition. It is it's unbelievable. There's something about it that lets yourself free yourself from concept and form, and yet it is divine. I don't know how to characterize it. Thank you.
Oh, you did a very good job, Mary. I mean, it definitely has that. It has beauty. So one thing I would recommend is don't get stuck. I mean, for anybody, don't get stuck on a particular translation or anything. Just switch translations, switch poems, come back to it afresh, and keep going through it multiple times, because that's the easiest way to begin to see patterns in this. Next up is going to be George, followed by Julie. George.
Thank you. I personally gravitate towards situations that make me feel unsafe and uncomfortable, and this book certainly has done that for the past couple of millennia. It seems to have a lot of polarity organization. There's binary gender, there's causality, the unmoved mover. A lot of places it says we call, and then he describes it, or the author does, and then the author gives it a word, which is a dictionary style of lookup. And then there's a parent-child hierarchy in several of the poems. Three triples that seem to suggest stasis, not movement at all. One in chapter 46 has no greater than, and the greatest crime is greed, the greatest disaster, dissent, and the greatest fault, avarice. There, in another one, this is the last one, in 67, the three treasures. I paraphrase them. First treasure, poverty. Second treasure, humility. Third treasure, disability. All of these allow us to invite us to do nothing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, George. Next up is Julie.
Yeah, I like to understand like a context for anything I'm trying to learn. And so it looks to me, from what I can tell, that in this book I'm looking at, it says, why are there so many misinterpretations of the Tao? How can a philosophy dedicated to eliminating confusion spawn hundreds of misinterpretations? And I guess it was done intentionally by the writer to camouflage it because he didn't want misuse of it. And therefore you needed a mentor or a tutelage of a Taoist master to help you clarify, which of course we don't necessarily have. And then it suggests that luckily, fortunately, at the core of the writings are these key principles that are very simple. And it's in it, I think this is great, the 52 living ideas, because it says, without the ability to engage in a discourse, the student must guess at all the answers and questions that arise during the learning process. And for a topic as difficult and serious as clarifying one's picture of the world, relying solely on a book is a dangerous course. So it sounds like maybe it's a good idea to get a clear understanding of the principles, and then we're going to be able to look at the Tao and see the reminders and warnings that will help us navigate through life on the basis of these principles.
Thank you, Julie. Next up is Mark. Mark, go ahead.
Is that me?
The one who typed exclamation mark.
Oh, that's me.
Okay.
I didn't realize I was going to be speaking. I thought I was going to be voicing my text-based opinion.
Okay, that's fine.
I can explain it.
Sure, go ahead.
I don't know. I like to focus on very specific like parts of the text. Whenever I read a text, I like to focus on the way in which very exact words are used. I'm always curious why we choose those words or why the author choose them. So verse 50 of the Tao, it says, men in being born emerge, in dying they enter. And I just found these two words very particular. The idea of emergence, it's a lot like the idea in Sanskrit of the avatar. Like the avatar comes from the Sanskrit root verb vrit, which means to turn, but then it has come to mean to incarnate. So it's a very similar concept, but it's pronounced at a different time in a different place. And I'm just very curious. Like I like to focus on.
I mean, one question I have is that how do you do that for a work like this? Because when I read 10 different translations, those words are different in all those 10 translations.
Right.
So how do you?
That's why it's interesting. That's exactly why it's interesting, because you start seeing patterns of attempts by an author or translator to get a sense of something that may not be very well translatable. And that might be true with the idea of the Tao itself. Like we might be searching for a kind of meaning that we do not possess because our grammar doesn't allow it. I know that in Tibetan and Sanskrit, there are certain ideas that are untranslatable, not because the translation is poor, but because the construct doesn't exist in the other language.
Yep.
Like, for example, ancient Greek had like a dual case. You could have like I in the singular, you could have the plural, you could also have like we too. And there's no way to explain in the absence of that language the idea of a dual case, and that like two-ness is so significant it deserves its own case structure. So any translation is going to be a poor translation.
Right.
So this is why, like, I don't claim to be an expert in the Chinese translation. I just find the choice of words fascinating because they suggest things that are far deeper than the incidental thing they're referencing. If that makes sense.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. I mean, this is something that we're going to have to talk about with just kind of translations, how to navigate, and it's certainly true. So for example, I read Sanskrit, and when I try to read and try to translate it into English, there aren't any concepts for some things, and it's very difficult. So, and I suspect that something like that is going on here too. And we kind of have to, without Chinese, I think the best thing I know of is to use kind of multiple translations and try to triangulate, not just on one word, but on the whole book, kind of doing this massive amount of triangulation. That's the only thing. And then of course, we'll get several, people to come and comment, people who know Chinese very well, to come and comment on this. So looking forward to doing that. Next up is going to be Alex, Kevin, and Madeline. Alex.
Hi, yeah, I mean, I'm very new to this, so it's very sort of general comment, but I was interested in kind of the tone of it. I guess this has to do with the translations as well. And I found it very, I mean, even though I think the speaker earlier, I think it was George, said it was something which is quite difficult and put you in a kind of a difficult position. For me, it was so incredibly accessible in a sense. It was as if, very playful, as if, you're being kind of laughed at and joked at, and then it would, take a tone of being authoritarian and then suddenly switch and be, it's sort of the generosity of it. I'm not sure, how that kind of translates in the original version, but just how important that tone was and how difficult, I guess, it is for a translator to capture that and to make it accessible to really everybody. It's very anti-intellectual in a kind of sense. So just impressions,
Yeah, that's excellent. I'm trying to do something. One of the things I'm trying to do to kind of correct for translator bias is that I do read some Indian languages very well. So I'm also looking at the translation of Dao De Jing into Hindi, for example, to see how they do it, how they handle it, and to see what kind of concepts that they use to describe it, and then compare it with the English translations as a separate way of doing a check. Next up is going to be Kevin, Madeline, and Brian. Kevin.
Yes, thank you. I just follow Mark about translation. They use simple words, and that's beautiful of a pictograph language, Asian language, right? So at first, if original meaning already changed. Now we use simple Chinese character. So some of it is very simple, some don't. So for this, I would say, if for let's say young Chinese high school school student, they can really understand, but not for after let's say 20 years they read it again, they got a different taste. And I would encourage people, let's see, read the different translation, get a piece of them, a different angle. It's like, I would say any translation is a part of a meaning. If you imagine this is one of word, it's, it could be multiple English. I'll give you one example. Let's see if you use this is 81. This is one example. If you translate English, that's beautiful already. They try keep simplify translator. If you really translate, it's more English words compared to Chinese. A second one is I want to say it's time is different. This is 2,500 years ago, like 500 BC. That time living environment is different. And the third one is first is even meaning of word is changing. I would say this book Dao De Jing is for ordinary people. It's from bottom people. They think about life, like what's a movement. Let's see if you say Dao, the first word explain that. Where's movement come from? He don't know, not even us, not even today. That's Harvard embrace of ignorance. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. So a couple of things. I think The language here, because I think, as you're saying, because of the Chinese script itself, one thing that I noticed is that a lot of the work is being done by these concrete images, things like water, and just lots of concrete images, like the wood, uncut wood, and so it's using all these concrete things to make general points. It's very poetic, but I think that's a kind of characteristic of it. And what we'll do is that after the breakout rooms, we will have a discussion on the topic of translations and how do you actually use translations effectively, given all the difficulties that we're talking about. We're talking about somebody 2,500 years ago, thinking in a completely different culture, thinking in a very different way, using a language which we don't know. How do we get at what is being said? And what are the ways of doing that? And how do we use translations to do that? So we'll discuss that once we come back from the breakout rooms. So it's going to be Madeline and Brian. Madeline.
A quick, let's
Go
see,
ahead.
start. That's our last link. That's how Dao original words. How many forms? You see, that's so complicated. Now change it to two part. The first part is Siu, like your head. The second part is like a road, like your horse. Anyway, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Madeline, followed by Brian. Madeline.
Yes, both of my comments pertain to translation, so I'll save them for after the breakout rooms.
Sure. Sounds good. Brian.
Okay. I have quite a bad cold and cough at the moment, so I might not get through the session, but anyway, I'll try. I tried several years ago comparing different translations, and I found it exceedingly difficult to get very far. What I did was I became aware of a book by Wayne Dyer, his name is, where he got a translation. I'm not sure if it was his, I don't think it was, but he printed the translation. He then pulled it apart and spoke about it in terms of his own life and how he used it in his life to move forward. That helped me understand a lot better what was going on. And I could actually sort of go back to his version and really understand it, whereas the previous translations, I couldn't understand at all. Could you, at a point, Joe made a comment about sort of the what was it, the feminism coming out in it. I don't know, I haven't read it, but I have a copy of a book, a translation of the Dao De Jing, which is called The Divine Feminine Dao De Jing. It's translated by Dr. Rosemary Anderson. I think that might be interesting for Joe to look at to see what if it matches with what he's talking about there. I briefly looked through it, and there are some differences, although I think it falls in line mainly. But it's worth looking at.
Thank you, Brian. Excellent points. And if after the breakout rooms, if you could put the chat, if you could put the link to Wayne Dyer's translation in the chat, that would be great. So folks, what we're going to do is that we are going to go to breakout rooms for about just a short time, maybe about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, so people can just talk to each other in a small group. And then we'll come back and talk about our impressions and kind of looking forward. We're going to be studying this for the next month. I'm planning to do at least a dozen meetups on it. And I want to get reactions of people about their level of excitement, what they're looking forward to in studying this. And then also I want to talk about the translations and come up with kind of ideas that will help us navigate all of that. So I'm going to do breakout rooms only for 15 minutes. Please let everybody talk in the breakout rooms for about a minute or two, so you get all the thoughts on the table, anybody who wants to speak. Secondly, keep on topic. We're just talking about Dao De Jing. Be brief and be courteous. Starting the breakout rooms now. Welcome back, folks. Welcome back. All right. So what I want to do now is to first talk about translations and strategy for reading, because I want to make sure that different people have different approaches, different kind of possibilities of how to do this. And then we can talk about what we are looking forward to doing this month. Okay, so any suggestions on translations? I mean, I'll give you my suggestion first, and then go ahead and type exclamation mark. If you'd like to talk about translation, you can also ask a question about translation, and we will take all the questions together at the end. So my general approach to translation is that I try to find a translation that speaks to me. If it is going to be hard to do something, it's not going to work. So you should find a translation that speaks to you. It's a work of tremendous, I mean, the feeling that, for example, Donna described is the right feeling of saying you have to have a sense of awe, of saying, wow, you have to have a sense of beauty. And all of that has to be there in the translation. And which of the translations speaks to you will differ. My favorite one is, of course, Brian talked about Wayne Dyer, that, Brian is a very conscientious guy. Okay, so when he says that he looked at many translations, I know he looked at many translations, and finding Wayne Dyer was the thing that opens up the book for you. And I think you need to find somebody like that. So for me, it was Ursula Le Guin. The thing I like about her is that she's a science fiction writer. So she writes beautifully, and she has a poetic flair. She writes poetry, and she grew up with it because her father was into it. So as a kid, they had these 19th century translation, and she has been going through it ever since she was a kid, listening to the ideas from her dad. So she has all that base, and then she has a poetic flair to her. So her spirit responding to Tao comes through the translation, and it spoke to me. So I started that. So the way I see it is that is my spine. That is the spine on which I'm building everything. Then I'm reading 5 different translations, and I'm doing that gently, where I'm trying to, because I'm seeing these translations almost as interpretations, and each of the author brings in points about each of the, in each poem, which are new to me. No matter how well a translator tries to do, this is a deep work and a very rich work. And by its nature, looks like the translator has to focus on some aspects. So if you're trying to read multiple translations, then you see all these aspects. And I'm not proceeding in a literal way. I'm not trying to say, let me try to understand this sentence, because I don't think that is effective. I'm trying to take in the whole, and I'm doing like dozens of passes over it. I'm also using an audio version of the book. So I've listened to it while I'm walking and things like that. So it lets those thoughts percolate. So that's what I'm doing with translations, and I'm finding it very useful. And like week by week, I will have more reports on what I'm doing with the translations. And I encourage you to do that as well. So let's start with Madeline, Dave, Michael, and Kevin. Madeline, what are your thoughts about translation?
Okay, several things. Let's see. First, well, I was very intrigued that you are looking at the Sanskrit translation. And I think it would make for a fantastic evening if you had one verse where you had looked at the Chinese or an English translation and the Sanskrit translation, and then talked it back to us in English, describing how they had translated it and what the terms mean. Also, we discussed in the breakout room, so 2 more points quickly.
Sure.
One is we had discussed ways of finding what translation works for you.
Mm-hmm.
And I had thought, you could just pick a chapter, like pick chapter 1, and just look at the different versions of it online and see which one just kind of works, where the language works and it feels right. And that would be a kind of simple method of finding that way. And then the third thing is that there's a website, which by now a couple of us have put in the chat, mdbg.net. You can type in the Chinese word into the search box. So you could type in DAO. If you can't put the accent mark in, don't worry about it. You'll be able to figure out which character is which. And I'm wondering if there is just a pinyin version of the Dao with the accent marks on it. And another fun project might be we could pick one, or at least someone could pick one verse and just try typing in those words and seeing what the different flavors of meaning of each word are.
Thank you. Thank you, Madeline. So firstly, I mean, I'm not reading a Sanskrit translation. I'm reading a Hindi translation. I have not found a Sanskrit translation, and my Sanskrit is not good enough. I can read about 90% of the words. I'm reading Hindi, and I'm trying to find a Marathi translation of it. But it certainly, and it's just a corrective mechanism for me at this point. So the number of people who have translated it to Indian languages is very small, and I'm not, the jury is still out for me, as if, you know, whether they have done a great job, because you really need to be a great thinker in order to fully express it, because you kind of have to take it in and you have to be able to express it in your language. So the standard for a translator is quite high. The second thing is that I second your thing about taking up, you know, looking at multiple translation of a single verse, but I also recommend that choose a verse that you really, really like, because then your ability to discern all kinds of patterns is going to be enhanced dramatically if that verse actually speaks to you. So if you choose that, then you can go and you can keep doing that. It's not, you can do all of it in parallel. You can, at least that's how my mind works. Next up is going to be Dave. Dave, what are your thoughts about translation?
Thank you very much, Shrikant. I will come to confession. I have not read any of this. I do want to learn about the East, and I hope we can start talking about content. And my suggestion is, if there's 80 verses or chapters, to attack 4 or 5 in each session and dissect them and get in and start talking about them. But so far, we're just arguing about translations. Thank you.
Dave, you're a very bad student. You have to do homework. You have to read. You can't just come and cheat.
I got too many Zoom sessions to go to, Shrikant.
So no. So let's start by reading. It's reading is fundamental, because ultimately this is an individual quest. It is between you and God. You know, it is between you and nature. For all of us, each of us independently, we can help each other a lot by talking about it. But you have to read in order to get the most out of it. You can get some things secondhand, but it's only some things that are going to add to your relationship with the Tao. So that there is no option in that. And there are a million ways in which we are going to look at it. I'm not going to do it chapter by chapter, because I want to leave that to individual people. I invite everybody to bring their favorite chapter anytime they want, and you can read it out. You read out the poem, okay, and talk about what you got from it. And the fact that it comes from your heart, comes from your suggestion, is going to add a lot more than looking at it as a study, you know, say, okay, we are going to just find out what exactly does this word mean. You miss everything if you do that for this work. You know, they keep saying that, you know, you have to know names, you have to use names in order to run the kingdom, but you have to know when to let the names go. So let's not get hung up on names. Let each heart, each mind responding to this speak to us. Let's speak, let's bring that forward. And I think that's the way in which we can get massive amount. out of this. Next up is Mike.
I found, I agree with Brian. I found Wayne Dyer's version to be an excellent starting point if you're new to studying the Tao, because he basically lived it for a year. I think he wrote the book by dividing a full year by 81. So he might live, say, by 3 or 4 days. He'd study something and then apply it to his own life. And then he'd write his reaction to it. And then he had a recommendation at the end of each chapter that said, doing the Tao now, which gives you a chance to go out in the real world and apply it yourself. So it's a good like outward start. And then after you go through that book, then read a translation without any direction, and then you can make your own interpretation. But he did a really good job of the terminology and the basic pitfalls that you might find as a student. So I found that translation to be an excellent starting point.
Fantastic, Mike. Mike, can you go ahead and put the link to the book in the chat? Thank you. All right, let's see. Give me just a second here. Okay, next up is Kevin. Kevin, what are your recommendations for translation?
Okay. Before doing that, I'm going to share two common first for translation. The two I noticed already is different. The TND, one is compared to Earth. They use heaven and Earth. That is different. I would use TND style. We could use the whole. Both is we talk about the world. You can change, and the should be comparison universe and Earth, or cosmos and Earth would be better. That's my opinion. Maybe you talk to Jin or other people, but heaven definitely is not inaccurate. Second one is yesterday I mentioned that it's 10,000 words. That things that means everything. Old days. 10,000 things, lots. So for me, I volunteered George already. That's actually two from George. He right away asked me 2 questions about that. I'm going to answer right away. So he also put a Google Sheet. So I would join that discussion group. For my suggestion, Swanka, that's your choice. The 81 chapter, one of June breakout room, one lady. They buy a book from Amazon. They cannot match what we talk about, chapter to chapter. If they see anybody else mention at least like you do, chapter 25, manage which words they can locate what we talk about, or we can use one book everybody agree with. We already on the line posted here already. Or we can group the chapter. Let's see 10 chapter, we're going to this session, do it. For me, I'm a volunteer, whatever you mean to help, I do it.
Sure, I want to keep it flexible. I mean, there is, I've been running these meetups for a long time. I've been kind of looking at discussions, and what I like to do is that I like to give the maximum amount of freedom for everybody. And it's my job to make sure that it kind of the chemistry works very well. So what I suggest is that I think, just explore yourself. There are some really, really good ideas that people have put in. I'm very excited about looking at Wayne Dyer's translation. And many of these are available online. Many of them are available as YouTube things. So just look things up and go from there. Okay, next up is going to be Jean. Jean, what are your recommendations about translation? Actually, you have some translations that you send me. If you could put them in chat so people can start exploring them. Jean, go ahead. Jean, you're
sorry.
on.
So yeah, so I have a few translations in PDF. I joined the actual book reading on Dao De Jing earlier with the Seattle group. And I found during the discussion, most of the time we try to figure out what the really means, because every translation have different interpretation. Then I found the Chinese translation as well, because it's ancient Chinese poem. So even for Chinese translation, it's also different versions too. So it seems we spend a lot of time to figure out what exactly is intended. So anyway, so I have, the way I'm reading it is I compare all these different translations in English and Chinese, trying to figure out which I think is more accurate or close.
Do you have any favorites?
Not really.
Okay. Okay.
Actually, I'm not sure. I joined late because I have some other family issues.
Sure.
So I prepared a PPT. I'm not sure if you have time. I can present it very quickly.
No, it's let's do it tomorrow, Jean.
Okay.
Okay, I'll give you time tomorrow.
Okay.
This is late. I want to make sure that there is enough interaction. All right.
Okay.
Next up is going to be George. George, what are your comments about translation? George, are you there? Oh, he's just left. Okay. All right. Let's see. Okay. So it looks like we got that. So let's just, as final thoughts. So firstly, I want to tell you that tomorrow, again, we are going to continue this. I've got different videos. There is a video by Alan Watt and some videos by Bruce Lee, talking about in completely different styles. I wanted to kind of keep, just talk about different, just show kind of different manifestations of these ideas. So we are going to continue the discussion tomorrow. But what I want to do now with the time that we have is to talk about your, we're going to be studying Tao for the past, for this month of May. What do you think about that? What are you looking forward to? Any thoughts? So let's start with Sarika. Go ahead and type ! if you would like to share what you're looking forward to, any suggestions that you have. I'm going to put my email address in the chat, so you can go ahead and email me any suggestions. Sarika, go ahead.
Okay, so I probably really only gave this a serious read today. And I think after I heard someone say that each of the chapters was potentially written for like a year of someone's life, I can, to me, that clicks and makes sense. If that makes sense to me. And I really appreciate these ideas about, insight being something constant within us that we can tap into with this invisible Tao force. And it's really very interesting. And it's, I really like to keep reading through it because it addresses a lot of the various, I said this before in the breakout room, the vicissitudes of like human experience that can be difficult to grapple with and emotionally and psychologically shake us. But, this kind of each passage to me is sort of like a meditation on how to like confront these difficulties and still come back to some sort of center, which is interesting. That being said, I'm interested to see the Hindu kind of translation, just because I think, this is like, put your weapons down, you don't need weapons, which also reminds me of like those Kung Fu movies where it's like, they're doing Kung Fu without weapons, but then some guy brings like some Western weapon, but that's a different story. But like how Hinduism is like, fight the battle, and the arc of history is something else. So I don't know. I'm very interested.
Okay, wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Joe, what do you think?
I mean, I'm excited about it. I think it could complement a lot of the other things that we're doing. Both Order and Chaos with Jordan Peterson. I also think that it has a lot to do with the art of learning as well. And I think that these together can really help me change my perception on a number of different areas. So specifically when it comes to learning, but I think that this is I've enjoyed what I've read thus far. So, and I've enjoyed the meetup. I had a great breakout room, and it's been good.
Wonderful. Next up is Jean.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this because I always want to learn. Dao De Jing, I mentioned I was studying all the Western literature when I was in China. And when I come to America, I start to realize how much value the Chinese culture offer actually. I always, even though I learned a lot of idiom from Chinese, just from the past. And those always explain so many things. For example, there's one Dao De Jing means when the water reach there, then the channel is ready. So it's like, there's so many things like, oh, don't push things. When it's reached there, everything will find a solution, basically. So much things I learned in the past makes so much sense as I get older. So when, I'm not sure you have the same experience, like when sometimes you read different books, then suddenly realize everybody talking exactly the same thing. So what they're talking about actually is Dao, is a nature law. So everybody talking from this different perspective. So like, oh, this book is actually have everything we need. And, and when all the Western thinking, Eastern thinking is all talking about exactly the same thing, which is nature law. And so I'm very excited to learn this finally, put everything together. So I'm glad you proposed this exciting event.
Wonderful. And look forward to your presentation tomorrow. So just, excellent. Next up is Judith. Judith, what do you think you'll get from this?
Oh, I'm really looking forward to it because I already like the text very much. Like it resonates with me more than many other things that I've, looked into. So I'm very interested to get, hear what other people think from their own perspectives as they read these different poems and what they take from it and learn from that as well. I'm looking forward to it.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. Anybody else wants to share? Mike, can you talk a little bit about your experience with Dao De Jing when you read it first?
Sure. Am I muted, Shrikant? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah. So as I mentioned yesterday, the first interaction was through studying Taekwondo, and I had the master who was training me was someone who was very steeped in the Dao De Jing, and he did everything opposite with me. When I was doing something wrong on the mat, if it was an egregious offense, he had a soft approach to correcting me, and if I did something that I thought was very, non-egregious, he would really pound me. And I noticed that even the way he taught Taekwondo, if he wanted to teach how to throw a right punch, everything came from the left hand first, that you would almost pull air with your left to throw with your right. And that constantly repeats itself in the Tao. And when he first exposed me, that's when I went and got Dyer's book. And for someone who, I don't know if saying a Western thinker is correct, but at least somebody here born in the States, it was an excellent, excellent start because, as I mentioned earlier, Dyer relates his own personal experience with the Tao in his everyday life. And I just started to apply it in my own. And then that led to looking at things that way on the chessboard as well. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Anybody else wants to make any comments? All right. So I want to say that, I want to, Franklin, go ahead. Franklin, yes. What has been your experience with Dao De Jing? Looks like you've spent some time with it.
Yeah, I was introduced to it in 1977, and it became like my Bible, and it really influenced my life profoundly. What I wanted to say was Richard Wilhelm, who's regarded as a really top of the line Chinese translator, translated the Tao Te Ching, and that would probably be a great translation to take a look at.
Okay, Richard Wilhelm?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Could you put it again in the chat so people have it?
Absolutely.
Wonderful. All right, folks. So we are, we're just getting started. Tomorrow, we're going to continue this with slightly different videos. We're going to have a presentation by Jean on it. Then I'm hoping to have one more kind of detailed presentation on Dao De Jing this weekend. And then the finale is going to be Yasuhiko Kimura talking about his translation of Dao De Jing. Again, my email address is 52livingideas@gmail.com. Please send me your comments, any suggestions that you have. As you can tell, as you can guess, it's an enormously complex thing to pull off, both because I want it to be true for each of us individually, because it is primarily a spiritual journey. It is kind of connecting with nature itself. That's what it is about. At the same time, we have potential of learning a lot from each other. So we're doing both of them together. And we're doing it, through this whale of languages where we're trying to get at things. So it's enormously complex, but enormously fun things. So find things that work for you and use it. Again, I invite you to bring your favorite poems of these 81, and we'll have plenty of opportunity at any point of time. You can simply say, I want to, this is the poem I like. I would like to recite it, and you will have opportunity of doing it every time. All right. So you can just recite the poem by itself and let it stand, or you can recite the poem and talk about what you got from it, because the more perspectives we get, I think we'll be able to triangulate better. All right. So thank you very much, folks. We will see you soon. Bye.